Have you ever wondered about the secrets behind the most mysterious artifacts in history? Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, the channel where we explore incredible relics, lost civilizations, and ancient mysteries that refuse to stay buried. Before we dive in, please hit subscribe and like, and tell us where are you watching from and what time is it there. The clock that measured nothing. In the shaded courtyard of an ancient Hellenistic city, where marble colonnades once gleamed in the rising sun and the hum of voices mingled with the rustle of olive branches, there stood an object that at first glance seemed unremarkable. A vessel of stone and bronze with narrow channels and quiet trickles of water. Yet this was a clock unlike any sundial that cast its shadow across time, unlike any tally etched upon clay tablets or carved into pillars, for this was a water clock, a clepsydra as the Greeks named it. A device meant to measure time not with the movement of the heavens or the sweep of shadows, but with the slow descent of water from one chamber to another, a patient counting of drops, a steady rhythm as delicate as breath. It was a clock that measured everything, and yet, perhaps, in some deep and unspoken way, measured nothing at all. The people who gathered around it would watch as water flowed, their eyes following the slow descent upon calibrated marks, their ears catching the faint trickle that echoed in courtyards and council chambers, in law courts and observatories, where time itself was harnessed, or so they believed, in a liquid stream that seemed tame, yet endlessly elusive. Imagine the artisans who constructed it, their hands guiding chisels against bronze, their minds aligning spouts and vessels with mathematical care, knowing that one misplaced notch could disrupt the delicate equilibrium, and yet beyond the precision, beyond the geometry, there was a kind of humility in this attempt to hold time within a bowl, for the water slipped silently, endlessly, beyond grasp, reminding all who watched that hours might be marked but never truly caught. In Athens and Alexandria, in Rhodes and Pergamon, such clocks appeared, not merely as tools but as symbols of order, of reason, imposed upon the ceaseless passage of days. And yet each one, including the solitary clepsydra we imagine now, stood as a paradox. For while it measured moments, it could not halt them. While it ticked silently with each drop, it revealed that measurement itself was fragile, relative, and sometimes utterly without meaning. A clock that measured nothing. Step closer, as if standing in that courtyard, the air warm with the scent of figs and resin. And listen. The sound is faint, a soft dripping into stone, like a whisper, like rain that never ends. And you realize that those who sat near it, scholars in flowing robes, judges presiding over disputes, students awaiting lectures, were not only keeping track of arguments or lessons, but were listening to the passage of their own lives in liquid syllables, water speaking in a language beyond words. The device itself was simple yet intricate. A large stone basin, perhaps carved of limestone, fitted with an inlet at the top and a narrow outlet at the bottom, through which water escaped at a controlled rate. Along its inner wall, marks were carved, divisions of hours or fractions thereof, each line representing a span of time as the water descended past it. Some were calibrated for daylight, for in Greece, hours expanded and contracted with the seasons, longer in summer, shorter in winter, so the water clocks were adjusted, filled with more or less water depending on the month, a system at once ingenious and frustrating, for no 2 days were measured the same, no flow perfectly constant, and so the paradox deepened, as if the clock itself admitted that time is never uniform, never obedient, always shifting with the sun and shadows, always escaping even when caught. Picture a courtroom in Athens where citizens gathered to hear cases, each litigant given a measure of water to state his argument, the clepsydra standing nearby as silent judge. When the last drop fell, his time was ended, regardless of the story left untold. One can almost feel the tension as words spilled quickly, as orators measured their breath against the trickling clock, as jurors glanced not only at the speaker but at the vessel that determined how much of his truth could be heard. Did the clock then measure justice? Or did it expose its absence, showing that the limits of time bore no relation to the depth of argument, that fairness could be confined by the weight of water? In this sense, the clock measured nothing of justice, nothing of truth, only the length of speech, and yet, for the people who relied on it, it was everything. The paradox grows larger the more one contemplates. Scholars in Alexandria employed clepsydra to track celestial movements, to record the rising of stars and the timing of eclipses. They stood upon high terraces, water flowing in measured streams, while above them the heavens wheeled with a rhythm of their own. Imagine their frustration, their awe, as the trickle of water marked intervals that never quite matched the motions of the stars, as if the cosmos mocked their attempts to reduce its grandeur to drops in a basin. Perhaps they realized then that no human device could ever contain eternity, that every clepsydra was less a measure of time than a mirror reflecting our desire to order what is beyond us. Step again into the courtyard, and watch the surface of the water shimmer as light plays upon it, reflecting sky and cloud, olive branches swaying above. In its reflection, one might see more than passing time. One might glimpse the fleeting nature of life itself. The child who once watched it in curiosity might return as an old man, the clock unchanged, the water still trickling, yet everything else altered, a reminder that while the device persists, the lives it marks slip away. It is here that the phrase, "the clock that measured nothing," finds its deepest meaning. For while it measured drops and intervals, it measured nothing of love or loss, nothing of laughter or sorrow, nothing of the moments that truly define existence. All it offered was the illusion of control, the faint comfort of knowing that time could be divided, even if it could never be held. Consider, too, the possibility that the clepsydra had a ritual function, beyond courts and lectures. In temples, water was sacred, purifying, life-giving. To use water to measure time was perhaps to invite the divine into the reckoning of hours, to let sacred essence flow in rhythm with human endeavor. The clock might have stood near altars, drops falling in cadence with chants, priests watching as the water marked the span of a hymn or ritual sacrifice. In this sense, the clock was both tool and offering, a vessel where human intention and divine presence converged. Yet here, too, it measured nothing tangible, nothing lasting, for when the water was gone, only silence remained, the ritual complete, the meaning carried not in the marks of stone but in the memory of those who witnessed. Now let us imagine the artisans again, shaping bronze tubes, polishing surfaces, etching marks. Did they feel pride in creating a device that would outlast them, or did they know its futility, that no matter how precise their calibration, the water would never flow exactly the same, that tiny variations in temperature, pressure, and material would always alter its course? Perhaps they smiled at the irony, recognizing that their work was both triumph and futility, a labor that gave order and yet admitted chaos, a creation that mirrored life itself. Walk further into the scene, past the clock, into the rhythm of the city. Markets bustle, philosophers debate, children chase each other across stones warmed by the sun, and always, somewhere nearby, a clepsydra drips, unnoticed yet constant, like the heartbeat of a world. Those who passed it daily may have stopped hearing it, just as we stop hearing our own pulse, yet when silence fell, its absence was startling, as if the flow of water was not merely time, but existence itself. Imagine the night watch, a soldier standing in shadow near the city gate, his duty marked by water rather than sun, as the clepsydra in the guardhouse released its drops, dividing his vigil into measured spans. Each hour he listened. Each hour passed, not by stars alone, but by the steady drip, a reminder that his long night was finite, that dawn would come, that even endless darkness could be counted. And yet, when he looked back years later, would he remember the hours as water measured them, or only as moments of waiting, of longing, of thought? Perhaps the clock had given him structure but measured nothing of what mattered most. We might also consider the broader symbolism of water, flowing and formless, impossible to grasp, always slipping between fingers. To use water as a means of measuring time was itself a profound gesture, an acknowledgement that time is as fluid as the element chosen to represent it. Both water and time move endlessly forward, never pausing, never returning, always carrying with them fragments of what was, and hints of what will be. In this way, the clepsydra was not merely a clock but a meditation, an object that taught its observers that measurement is an illusion, that what we truly encounter in life cannot be marked by lines upon stone or bronze, but only by experience itself. Now pause, and imagine standing before such a device today, fragments unearthed from ruins, pieces of stone with faint lines, bronze pipes green with age, archaeologists piecing together what once guided the flow of hours. As you look upon it in a museum, you may read placards explaining its function, its history, its role in courts and temples, and yet standing there you may feel more than curiosity. You may feel the silence between drops, the vastness of what it could never measure. You may realize that the clock measured nothing of the people who stood before it centuries ago, nothing of their laughter, their tears, their hopes, yet somehow, in its silence, it still whispers, reminding us that time itself is both everything and nothing, a paradox no less potent now than in the days of Greece. And so, the clock that measured nothing endures, not as a perfect instrument, not as a relic of precision, but as a reminder of human longing, the desire to capture what cannot be held, the attempt to bind in vessels what slips away. It endures as story, as symbol, as presence, carrying us back to courtyards where water fell, drop by drop, where people listened with hope and futility, where time was both measured and lost. It is a meditation in stone and bronze, a whisper of the ages, a relic that still teaches us, even now, that perhaps the most profound truths lie not in what is measured, but in what escapes measurement forever. The spear that whispered victory. The spear lay silent, its iron head darkened by centuries, its shaft long since rotted away, yet the weight of its presence still seemed to breathe of battles never truly forgotten. To gaze upon it was to imagine the clamor of men shouting in languages that had no written alphabet, only spoken rhythm. To hear the dull thunder of hooves against uneven soil, and to feel the haze of smoke rising over grasslands where once, long ago, Thracian tribes gathered to fight, to honor, to live, and to die. The spear, unearthed from Bulgarian soil, whispered in its silence, not the names of kings, for few of those names survived, but the echo of a people whose memory lingers like twilight across the mountains and plains of southeastern Europe. To follow this whisper, you must first step back, far back, into a world where the Thracians lived. Imagine the land in the first millennium before our current era. Hills rolling with forests of oak and beech, rivers swelling with the spring melt, the air rich with birdsong and the scent of pine. Villages dotted the hillsides, their homes built from wattle and daub, thatched roofs smoking gently from hearth fires. These were not sprawling kingdoms but scattered tribes, each holding fiercely to their valleys and plains, sometimes joining together under charismatic rulers, sometimes splintering again into kin groups and warbands. They farmed barley, raised horses, tended sheep, brewed honey wine, and when the call came, marched to battle with their weapons gleaming in the sun. The iron spear was their companion, the extension of their strength. Iron itself was new in their world, harder than the bronze that had shaped weapons for centuries. To forge such a spearhead was to draw lightning from earth, to take raw ore from the ground, heat it in charcoal fire, hammer it with rhythm until its edge sang sharp and unyielding. Each blow of the smith's hammer was more than labor, it was ritual, for iron was not yet ordinary. It was a gift that seemed to bind human hands with the hidden veins of the earth, and when a spearhead emerged glowing from the forge, quenched and hardened, it seemed as if a fragment of the god's own fire had been trapped within. Close your eyes and you might imagine a Thracian smith at his anvil, sweat pouring down his face, sparks leaping into the gloom of his hut. Around him hang tools, tongs, unfinished blades. He works slowly, steadily, the rhythm of hammer striking iron, matching the beating of his heart. Outside, the tribe prepares for the season's campaign. Men fitting leather armor, women weaving straps, children wide-eyed at the sight of warriors readying for departure. The spearhead, once finished, is mounted onto a wooden shaft, polished smooth, balanced for throwing and for thrusting. It will ride into battle in the hands of a man whose name we will never know, yet whose fate was bound to this weapon. The Thracians themselves were feared across the ancient world. To the Greeks they were both neighbors and enigmas, wild, fierce, given to drink and song, and yet also deeply spiritual. They worshipped gods that blended into those of Greece and Scythia, gods of the hunt, of war, of wine, and of the underworld. Their poets sang of immortality. Their priests whispered of life beyond death. When Herodotus wrote of them, he called them the second most numerous people on earth, surpassed only by the Indians, though forever divided, never united under a single king for long. And so the spear, though humble in its silence, belonged to a people whose presence rippled far beyond their valleys. Imagine now a dawn before battle. The sky is still streaked with pale light, mist clinging to the grass, the horses restless, stamping the earth. Thracian warriors gather in loose ranks, their cloaks striped and dyed, their long hair braided, their eyes sharp beneath helmets of bronze or iron. Some carry small crescent-shaped shields of wicker or wood, others strap knives and axes to their belts. But in nearly every hand gleams a spear, dozens, hundreds, tips flashing as the first rays of the sun glance across them. The air hums with anticipation, with fear, with courage, and somewhere in that line of men stands the owner of this iron spearhead, gripping it tight, whispering perhaps a prayer to Sabazios, the Sky Father, or to Bendis, the moon goddess, who watched silently from above. The whistle of a bird breaks the silence. Then the war cry rises, raw and guttural, echoing off the hills. Feet pound, spears lower, and the clash begins. Spears are thrown first, arcing through the air, shafts humming before they crash into shields or flesh. Then the warriors close in, gripping their weapons tightly, thrusting, parrying, the ring of iron on bronze filling the air. Dust rises, mingled with sweat, with blood, with the shouts of the living and the cries of the dying. The spearhead now preserved in soil, once pierced through this storm, its iron edge cutting into shield or armor, maybe into the body of an enemy whose own story vanished the moment the spear found him. Yet the weapon was more than war. For the Thracians, spears could serve in ritual, planted upright in the earth as symbols of oath or offering. Archaeologists have found spearheads driven into graves, laid beside the bones of warriors as companions for the afterlife. They have found them bent deliberately, killed, so that they might journey beyond, their power transferred from the living to the dead. The spearhead, unearthed in Bulgaria, may have once rested in such a tomb, left beside a chieftain clad in ornaments of gold and silver, his horse sacrificed to accompany him, his clan gathered to sing him into memory. And so the spear whispers not only of battle, but of belief. It speaks of a people who saw no firm line between life and death, for to them death was a passage, a doorway to another realm. The Orphic mysteries said to arise among Thracians taught of the soul's immortality, of cycles of rebirth, of hidden truth sung through music and ritual. Imagine a gathering at night, deep in a forest clearing. A fire burns high, drums throb, flutes keen, men and women dance in circles, stamping, clapping, crying out to the gods. At the center stands a priest or poet, perhaps holding a spear upright like a staff, chanting of journeys the soul will take, of battles unseen, of eternal return. The iron head gleams in the firelight, not as a tool of death but as a bridge between realms. As the centuries rolled on, the Thracians were drawn into the orbit of larger powers. Persians marched through their lands, demanding tribute. Greeks traded with them, hired them as mercenaries. Macedonians under Philip and Alexander recruited their fierce warriors, their spearmen and horsemen, into campaigns that stretched as far as India. Romans too would come, conquering their valleys, building roads, cities, fortresses. Yet through it all, the Thracian spirit remained, etched into soil, into legend, into iron like this. Pause now and listen. The spear whispers still. It tells of the clang of forges in smoky huts. It tells of riders cresting a hill at dawn. It tells of feasts where warriors lifted horns of wine, laughing, their spears leaning nearby. It tells of funerals where the same weapons were laid gently into earth, a final act of loyalty. And though the spearhead is small, rusted, broken perhaps at the edges, it holds within it a universe of memory. Think too of the hands that held it, calloused, scarred, strong, yet also tender, when they returned home, cradling children, stroking the mane of a horse, planting seeds in spring soil. The warrior was never only a warrior, he was father, son, brother, farmer, lover. The spear he carried was both burden and protection, the object that bound him to his people's fate. To hold it was to carry not just iron, but identity. Now let your mind drift further and further, until the battlefields fade, until the chants grow faint. Picture instead the landscape itself, the Bulgarian plains and hills where the Thracians once walked. The rivers still flow, glinting beneath the sun, the forests still sway, whispering with wind. Beneath the soil, countless more spearheads lie, waiting, some to be found, others never to see light again. They rest in silence, like seeds of memory, while above them the world has changed 1,000 times. Empires risen and fallen, new languages spoken, new cities built. Yet still, in the quiet of night, when wind rustles through grass and stars shimmer overhead, it is possible to imagine those whispers returning, faint but insistent, the voices of Thracians long gone, carried on the iron breath of the spear that outlived them. And so, you drift with it, through history, through silence, through shadow and light. The spear does not boast of victories won or kings remembered. It does not care for the names etched in chronicles. It speaks only of life lived, of courage tested, of faith held, of hands gripping wood and iron with all the hope and fear of being human. It is, in its way, eternal, and in its eternity, it waits, whispering still. The sandals that walked without masters. In the quiet depths of the Valley of the Kings, where the sun spills its golden heat across arid sands and jagged cliffs, there lies a tomb that once cradled the boy king Tutankhamun. Though centuries have passed, and empires have risen and fallen, the echoes of his life linger softly, like whispers of wind through a desert canyon, or the faint trace of a melody long forgotten. Among the treasures he left behind, one artifact carries a quiet, almost ethereal presence, his sandals. Known now as the sandals that walked without masters, these humble yet regal objects seem, in their silent stillness, to tell a story that no historian or archaeologist has fully unraveled. Crafted with a meticulous care that seems almost ritual in nature, the sandals are fashioned from supple leather, their straps braided in intricate patterns, weaving both form and function into a singular, delicate design. Tiny beads of gold and faint sauce are threaded along the edges, catching even the faintest flicker of light, so that a mere shadow falling across them makes them shimmer as though alive. To touch them is to feel the weight not only of the leather, worn yet preserved by centuries, but of the centuries themselves, compressed into the soles that once pressed against the floor of a gilded chamber, and perhaps even across the sun-baked courtyards of a palace long vanished. One might imagine the boy king himself slipping them onto his feet for the first time, the leather cool and pliant against his skin. Each step he took would have been measured, deliberate, carrying not only his small youthful weight but the unspoken expectation of a throne and the invisible burden of a kingdom in the making. Yet now in the stillness of the tomb, the sandals lie in patient silence, as if waiting for some unseen presence to claim them, some unseen feet to awaken them. The Valley of the Kings is a place where time seems to pause. Wind curls around jagged cliffs, stirring clouds of sand that sparkle in the sunlight. At night the stars spill across the sky in brilliant, uncountable numbers, reflected in the dark stone of tomb entrances carved with silent hieroglyphs. It is here, amid the tombs of pharaohs who have long since returned to dust, that the sandals remain, unclaimed, yet almost sentient. To look upon them is to feel a gentle tug at the mind, as if they remember each step they ever carried, each corridor they ever traversed, each moment of life that passed over them. Historians and archaeologists have speculated endlessly about the daily life of Tutankhamun, the boy king who reigned during Egypt's 18th dynasty, ascending the throne at such a tender age that the weight of rule was almost unimaginable. His sandals, though small, seem to bear a disproportionate gravity. They are not merely objects of utility. They are symbols of transition, of passage from childhood into authority, from mortality into legend. The soft leather, once pliant, now hardened with time, seems to hum faintly with memory. And though they have never been worn since the tomb was sealed, there is a sense that each thread remembers the warmth of a living foot, the imprint of a singular soul that has walked paths now lost to time. If one closes their eyes and imagines the boy king walking through the corridors of his palace, the sandals might whisper their history. Each step would echo faintly on the stone floors, a rhythm almost musical in its cadence. The gold and faience beads would catch the light, scattering tiny flecks of brilliance like stars fallen from the night sky. Perhaps he walked to the chambers where lessons were taught, where scribes inscribed papyrus with careful hieroglyphs. Perhaps he moved silently through hallways lined with servants and attendants, their eyes lowered in the presence of royalty. In these imagined steps, the sandals carry him forward, across centuries, so that the Valley of the Kings and the world beyond might still feel the pulse of a life once lived. But the sandals are also a reminder of absence. Tutankhamun himself is gone, taken too soon by fate, leaving behind treasures that speak in whispers rather than shouts. The sandals lie on display, delicate and quiet, and yet there is a palpable sense of life that clings to them. One can almost imagine, in the still of the night, the faintest movement, a slow pressing of toes against the leather, a sigh of air caught between heel and arch. They are objects of history, yes, but they are also objects of memory, vessels of the life they once accompanied, witnesses to rituals and processions, silent companions to a boy who would be king, who would command armies he never saw, who would carry the weight of a world far older than himself. The artistry of the sandals reveals much about the culture that produced them. Egypt during Tutankhamun's reign was a place of ritual precision and symbolic meaning. Every item within a tomb was selected not only for its beauty but for its power to guide and protect the deceased in the afterlife. Sandals in particular were essential for the journey beyond death. They provided protection and mobility for the Ka, the spirit that would continue walking through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. Thus these sandals were no mere adornment. They were talismans, imbued with the expectation that the boy king's essence would continue traveling even after the body had returned to dust. As the centuries passed, the Valley of the Kings was gradually swallowed by sand and time. Tombs were plundered, forgotten, then rediscovered by explorers and archaeologists driven by curiosity and ambition. Howard Carter's unearthing of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 brought the sandals, along with countless other treasures, into the light of the modern world. Yet even in display cases, behind glass and beneath museum lighting, the sandals seem to resist full comprehension. They do not simply exist, they remind the observer of absence and presence simultaneously. Each step they ever bore, each corridor they ever knew, is inaccessible, yet faintly traceable, like a whisper on the edge of hearing. One might imagine following them in the quiet hours before dawn, through the empty corridors of the tomb, past the painted walls depicting gods and pharaohs, past the gilded chests and ceremonial objects, until reaching the inner sanctum where they now rest. The air is heavy with the scent of stone, earth, and the faint trace of incense that centuries ago may have lingered as offerings. And there, in that stillness, the sandals lie waiting not for feet, but for memory, waiting not for motion, but for attention. They are relics, yes, but also companions of a world that continues, invisible, beneath our own. The boy king's life, so brief, is amplified in the quiet authority of the sandals. Each stitch, each bead, each worn curve of leather carries story. One might imagine him stepping through gardens, through ceremonial halls, across the sands of his kingdom. Perhaps the sandals remember the way the Nile felt beneath the morning sun, the way the shadows of obelisks stretched long and thin across palace floors. Perhaps they remember footsteps in the dark, when only the servants' whispers accompanied a young king learning the responsibilities that fate had thrust upon him. And yet, for all their historical significance, there is a humbling mystery in these sandals. They are silent, still, patient. They ask nothing, offer nothing directly, and yet they provoke reflection. What does it mean to walk without a master? Perhaps it is the quiet freedom of the afterlife, or the eternal loneliness of the tomb. Perhaps it is simply the gentle reminder that objects, imbued with human touch and attention, carry echoes far beyond the lives of those who made them. In the soft light of dawn, When the Valley of the Kings begins to wake and the first birds trace the edges of cliffs, the sandals seem to shimmer. They are golden and leather-bound, a small pair of shoes with an impossible depth. To watch them is to meditate on history itself, on mortality, on memory and presence, on the footsteps of a boy who became king and yet became legend. They are at once ordinary and extraordinary, silent and full of story, humble and eternal. As the day lengthens and tourists begin to file quietly through the tombs, snapping photographs and whispering in awe, the sandals remain untouched, nearly invisible amid the treasures that surround them. Yet in their quiet, they continue to carry the boy king across centuries, through imagined palace corridors, over sun-drenched Nile shores, into ceremonial halls and quiet moments of solitude, steps measured, deliberate, unbroken by time or distance. They are more than sandals, they are witnesses, companions, and carriers of the invisible weight of history itself. To linger with them, in imagination, is to walk slowly, to breathe softly, to feel the weight of time and presence mingling together, and perhaps, just perhaps, in the hush of the Valley of the Kings, when no one else is near, one can hear them move ever so slightly, a gentle echo of footsteps that once carried the boy king through a world both vast and intimate, familiar and unknowable, mortal and eternal. The house that refused to fall. In the rolling plains of Anatolia, where the soft wind carries the scent of wild grasses and distant rivers, there lies an ancient settlement that has watched the passage of time for thousands of years. This is Çatalhöyük, a Neolithic city whose mud brick walls once echoed with the rhythms of early human life. A city whose rooftops were worn smooth by generations of footsteps, and whose walls carried stories that remain silent to all but those who listen with patience. Among its many dwellings, one house stands in legend, quietly defiant against time, the house that refused to fall. Its walls, constructed from sun-dried mud bricks, still linger in the imagination like a whisper of endurance, a testament to human determination and ingenuity in the face of nature's ceaseless march. To step into the story of this house is to step back over 9,000 years, into a world where life was raw, tactile, and intimately connected to the earth. Mud and straw were mixed by hand, pressed carefully into molds, and stacked with precision, layer upon layer, until the walls rose strong and unyielding. There were no modern tools here, no metal reinforcements, only human hands guided by instinct, experience, and a desire to create something permanent amidst the vast open landscape. And yet, unlike many other homes that eventually crumbled under the weight of time, the storms or neglect, this house remained stubbornly upright, almost as if it were conscious of its own importance, a silent guardian of the settlement's past. Life in Çatalhöyük was communal. Houses were built so closely together that roofs became streets, and pathways between homes were often traversed by climbing over the walls themselves. In this context, the enduring house had a special presence. Its inhabitants, long since returned to dust, would have looked out over a landscape filled with neighbors, fields, and perhaps herds of goats and cattle wandering freely. Smoke from clay hearths curled upward through small openings in the roofs, carrying scents of cooked grains, roasted meat, and aromatic herbs. Within this particular house, the hearth would have been warm, the walls imbued with the rhythm of daily life, the touch of hands shaping pottery, kneading dough, weaving fibers, or engraving delicate designs into clay. Every corner, every brick, absorbed the essence of human life, becoming part of the house's invisible memory. The architecture of Çatalhöyük is remarkable in its simplicity and ingenuity. With no streets or formal thoroughfares, access to homes was through the roofs, climbed by wooden ladders or carefully arranged steps. Roofs were flat and covered in a layer of mud plaster, offering a place to sit, to converse, to dry food, or to observe the stars above. In this way, the house that refused to fall was not only a dwelling, but a vantage point, a center of quiet reflection amidst a bustling and vibrant community. Its persistence over millennia is both literal and symbolic. The structure itself resists collapse, while the story it carries continues to anchor imagination in the distant past. Inside, the house would have been organized with remarkable practicality. Sleeping platforms, raised slightly from the floor, were lined with mats and furs to provide warmth. Clay vessels of various sizes were carefully arranged for storing grains, seeds, and dried herbs. Tools of daily life, from flint blades to grinding stones, were positioned where they could be easily reached, their edges worn smooth by constant use. The walls, once vibrant with pigments, likely carried images of animals, abstract symbols, or representations of human figures. These images were more than decoration, they were expressions of belief, ritual, and identity. Some scholars speculate that certain rooms may have been sacred, spaces where the inhabitants engaged in ceremonies or communed with unseen forces, leaving traces that would endure long after the people themselves had vanished. The endurance of this house is partly due to the ingenuity of its construction. Mud brick, when carefully mixed and layered, becomes a surprisingly resilient material. Thick walls absorb heat during the day, keeping interiors cool and release warmth at night. Roofs, when maintained and repaired, remain stable, and the close proximity of other buildings helps shield each house from wind and erosion. Over centuries, many structures would have fallen, but this particular house seems to have been maintained, not only by its inhabitants, but perhaps also by the surrounding community. There is an almost poetic sense in imagining generations repairing and restoring its walls, conscious perhaps unconsciously, that some homes carry a deeper significance, a permanence beyond the physical. Outside, the settlement would have been alive with movement, children chasing one another across rooftops, women carrying baskets of grain, men tending livestock or venturing into fields to cultivate the fertile soil. Dogs and goats wandered freely, weaving between humans and homes, their presence adding a layer of companionship and protection. The distant hills and the occasional river would provide not only resources but also a constant reminder of the passage of time, the cycles of nature that continued regardless of human intervention. In this environment, the house was a quiet anchor, a place of stability amid the flow of daily life. Catalhuyuk itself is remarkable because it represents one of the earliest known large-scale urban settlements. Here, people lived in dense clusters, collaborated in agriculture, and participated in complex social and spiritual networks. The endurance of the house that refused to fall mirrors the endurance of these early communities, the capacity of human beings to create spaces that are both functional and symbolic. Each brick of the house is a testament to care, patience, and a quiet defiance against impermanence. In imagining it, one can almost feel the warmth of the sun on the mud plaster, the texture of the rough walls beneath fingertips, the soft echo of footsteps on the packed earth floors. Night in Catalhuyuk would have been a different world entirely. The sun setting behind distant hills would cast long shadows, turning rooftops and walls into dark silhouettes. Stars would emerge, brilliant and countless, reflected in the eyes of those who paused to look upward. Within the house, flickering oil lamps and small hearth fires would create dancing shadows on the walls, illuminating images and objects that had become part of the home's memory. The house, in its quiet way, seemed to breathe with the life it contained, a pulse of warmth and presence in the cool night air. One can imagine rituals taking place within its walls, perhaps a family gathered around a hearth, offering thanks for a successful hunt or a bountiful harvest. Perhaps a woman traced symbols into wet clay, marking the passage of a child from infancy to the first steps toward maturity. Perhaps a man carved designs into a tool or vessel, connecting craft to belief. These acts, small and daily, imbued the house with meaning. Over time, as inhabitants came and went, the house absorbed these stories, holding them within its walls, each layer of mud and straw, a record of lives lived and experiences felt. Even as the Neolithic era passed and civilizations rose and fell, the house endured. Many of its neighbors crumbled or were abandoned, yet its walls remained. Archaeologists, arriving millennia later, would uncover its foundations and walls, marveling at their resilience. The house, silent and unassuming, tells not only of construction but of human intent, the desire to persist, to create something lasting, to leave a mark on the world that endures beyond individual life. To linger in thought upon the house that refused to fall is to meditate on the delicate balance between human effort and the passage of time. It is to imagine hands pressing mud and straw with careful precision, to feel the warmth of the sun baking the walls, to hear the soft echoes of laughter, conversation, and ritual reverberating in empty corridors. It is to sense the presence of generations, their lives intertwined with the very structure that shelters them, each moment layering upon the last in an unbroken chain. And yet, for all its endurance, the house does not dominate. It coexists with the land, the wind, the seasons. It is part of the world, not apart from it. Its survival is not a triumph over nature, but a quiet dialogue with it, a testament to the human capacity to build, to care, and to maintain continuity amid the impermanence of life. Every brick, every layer of plaster, every faint trace of pigment is a reminder of a world long past but never entirely lost, a world whose heartbeat can still be felt in imagination and memory. The road that ended in shadows. In the heart of ancient Italy, where rolling hills meet the endless stretch of the horizon, there lies a road that has carried the footsteps of emperors, soldiers, merchants, and wanderers for more than 2 millennia. This is the Via Appia, the Appian Way, a marvel of Roman engineering whose stones have borne the weight of history and whose shadows stretch long into memory. Known to some as the Queen of Roads, it was a lifeline of the empire, a passage that connected the heart of Rome to distant lands. Yet in its quieter, forgotten stretches, it becomes something else entirely, the road that ended in shadows. To walk this road is to step into layers of time, to feel beneath your feet the carefully arranged basalt stones, each one shaped by hands that lived centuries before ours, worn smooth by the tread of countless travelers. The air carries faint whispers of history, of carts rolling along its surface, of soldiers marching in formation, of merchants carrying goods from distant provinces, of messages sent and received in the pulse of empire. And yet, in its more abandoned stretches where the modern world has yet to intrude, the Via Appia takes on a different character. Here, the road seems to fade, merging with the wild, with overgrown grass and tangled roots, with shadows that lengthen as the sun sinks behind distant hills. Imagine, if you will, a traveler from centuries past, stepping onto this road at dawn. The air is cool and crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and wild herbs. Birds rise in startled flight, and the faint trickle of nearby streams provides a gentle accompaniment to the footsteps along the stones. Each step echoes softly, reverberating against the sturdy walls of tombs and mausoleums that line the road, silent witnesses to lives lived long ago. The traveler pauses for a moment, touching the surface of a stone, feeling its smoothness and the faint grooves etched into it by generations of wheels and boots. In this moment, the road is not merely a path, it is memory made tangible, a bridge between the living and the long departed. The Via Appia was built with extraordinary precision, a hallmark of Roman engineering. Layers of stones, gravel, and sand were carefully laid to create a surface that would endure, and endure it has. Its construction allowed for the rapid movement of armies, the transport of goods, and the communication of messages across the vast Roman Empire. In its prime, it was alive with motion and purpose, yet the road's brilliance is matched by the eerie quiet that now fills its abandoned stretches. Where once there was clamor and activity, there is now only the whisper of wind through the grass, the distant cry of a lone bird, and the faint murmur of history carried on the air. As one follows the road further from Rome, the landscape changes. Olive groves and cypress trees line the edges, casting long, thin shadows that stretch across the basalt stones. Tombs and mausoleums emerge, some carved with care, and adorned with inscriptions, others crumbling into silence. These are the markers of memory, reminders that the road has always been more than a passageway. It has been a corridor of life and death, a place where the living honored the dead, and the ambitions of empire were inscribed into stone. It is along these stretches that the shadows lengthen, where the road seems to vanish into the folds of time, and where one can almost hear the voices of those who once walked here, whispering secrets into the wind. There are stories, whispered by scholars and travelers alike, of stretches where the road seems to lead to nothing, where the stones abruptly end or sink into the earth. Some say these were sections that were abandoned as the empire receded, forgotten by time and reclaimed by nature. Others suggest something more mysterious, that in these shadowed stretches, the road becomes a threshold between the present and the past, a place where the veil between what was and what is becomes thin. Standing here, one can feel the weight of centuries pressing gently on the shoulders, a quiet reminder that history is not simply a record, but a presence, lingering and unyielding. The tombs along the Via Appia tell their own stories. Some belong to patricians, their inscriptions detailing achievements and family lines, their walls adorned with reliefs of gods and symbols of power. Others are simpler, commemorating the unknown or the humble, their markers worn by wind and rain, nearly indistinguishable from the earth itself. These silent monuments add to the sense of the road's duality. It is both lifeline and memorial, passage and resting place, light and shadow. As the sun dips lower in the sky, the interplay of light and dark along the road becomes more pronounced, turning the stones into ribbons of silver and gray, stretching endlessly into the distance. Nightfall along the Via Appia transforms the road entirely. The moon, pale and luminous, casts a gentle glow across the stones, revealing the contours of the terrain in soft relief. Shadows stretch long and merge with the undergrowth, and the air is thick with the scent of moss, damp earth, and wild flowers. It is in this nocturnal quiet that the road's deeper character emerges. Here, in the stillness, one can imagine the passage of armies long gone, the flicker of torches in distant tombs, the hushed voices of those who once sought refuge along its edges. The road becomes a liminal space, a bridge between epochs, where the living and the dead, the known and the unknown, coexist in delicate balance. Even as modern roads and vehicles intrude upon certain sections of the Via Appia, the deeper stretches retain their ancient character. The stones, weathered but unbroken, continue to tell their stories. One can trace the grooves worn by carts, the subtle undulations shaped by generations of travelers, and the faint marks of human presence that remain etched into the surface. Every step taken along this ancient path is a dialogue with history, a slow, meditative process of listening and observing, of allowing the weight of time to settle gently in the mind and body. To linger on the road is to notice the smallest details, the texture of the stones beneath the fingertips, the faint lines where moss and lichen have taken root, the soft rustle of grass between the slabs. One begins to perceive the rhythm of the road itself, a slow heartbeat that echoes the passage of centuries. Footsteps become less a means of movement and more a ritual of connection, a way of touching the continuum of human endeavor that has shaped the world in subtle, enduring ways. The shadows along the road carry a particular resonance. They are not merely the absence of light, but the presence of memory, stretching across time to remind the traveler of those who walked before. Some are fleeting, cast by passing clouds or swaying trees. Others are permanent, etched into the stones and the surrounding landscape, reminders of what once was and what continues to linger. In these shadowed spaces, the road seems to breathe, alive with the whispers of the past, urging patience, observation, and reflection. Through the centuries, the Via Appia has witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the march of armies, the movement of goods, and the quiet steps of countless individuals. It has been a road of glory, of commerce, of conquest, and of solitude. And yet, in its quieter, forgotten stretches, it has become something more intimate, a space for reflection and meditation, a living memory of human perseverance and presence. To walk it today, in the gentle hush of early morning, or the soft glow of twilight, is to participate in a ritual as old as civilization itself, a slow and deliberate engagement with history, with mortality, and with the enduring power of place. Along the road, one finds remnants of inns and way stations, long abandoned, their foundations crumbling yet stubbornly holding the stories of travelers who once rested there. Fires were lit, meals shared, and plans made for the next leg of journeys that might take weeks or months to complete. Traders resting at these way stations might have carried silks from the east, or wine from distant vineyards, while messengers hurried along the stones delivering crucial word from Rome to the furthest corners of the empire. Now these way stations are silent, yet they hum with memory, as if the air itself remembers the warmth, the laughter, the hurried footsteps, and the quiet sorrow of farewells. Beyond the structures and tombs, the road intersects with rivers and streams, some shallow and placid, others more robust, requiring the construction of small bridges and causeways. The water itself adds another layer to the road's timelessness, reflecting the sky in muted colors, carrying leaves and debris, whispering secrets to the stones beneath. In the past, these waters were a lifeline, providing refreshment to travelers, watering animals, and supporting the local settlements that clustered near the road's course. Today they remain, gently reminding anyone walking there of continuity, of life flowing on even as the stones around it grow older and more silent. And so, as one walks the Via Appia, each step becomes a meditation, a slow, measured immersion in time. It is a place where imagination meets reality, where the past is as palpable as the present. One begins to feel a connection, not only to the people who constructed and traveled the road, but also to the countless souls who have crossed it since, each leaving a subtle imprint, a faint echo of life and purpose. The road is more than a physical path, it is a vessel of human experience, carrying whispers of ambition, love, labor, fear, and hope across millennia. At certain points along the Via Appia, the road rises gently, offering views of the surrounding countryside. Olive groves, vineyards, and scattered settlements stretch out, bathed in golden light at dawn, or tinted violet at dusk. The contrast between the enduring stone of the road and the ever-changing landscape reinforces the road's role as a constant amid flux. Travelers of the past would have paused to drink in these vistas, perhaps reflecting on their own lives or the empire they served, while modern wanderers might feel the same quiet awe, sensing the continuity that binds human experience across the centuries. The road is also a repository of stories both grand and personal, accounts of generals leading legions, of envoys delivering delicate messages, of families relocating across the empire, of merchants negotiating deals, and of ordinary people simply trying to traverse from one place to another. All converge here. Though names are forgotten and faces lost to time, the essence of these journeys remains embedded in the stones. Walking along the Via Appia, one can sense the layers of narrative, like sediment in a riverbed, each layer telling its own story, all merging into a continuum of human endeavor and memory. Shadows, long and mutable, are particularly evocative here. In the early morning, they are soft, stretching lazily as the sun rises, while at sunset, they elongate dramatically, merging with the undergrowth and tombs to create shapes that seem almost alive. Some claim that in these elongated shadows, one can glimpse the silhouettes of ancient travelers, their movements subtle yet unmistakable, fading when approached too closely. Whether legend or imagination, the experience underscores the road's unique atmosphere, where light and shadow, memory and reality, coexist in delicate equilibrium. The flora along the road also carries its own subtle stories. Wild flowers, grasses, and shrubs have reclaimed areas once dominated by human activity, growing between stones and along edges where carts rarely tread. Olive trees and cypresses, some centuries old, tower above, their roots entwined with the road itself. The scent of these plants, earthy, sweet, faintly bitter, blends with the warmth of sun-warmed stone to create a sensory tapestry that is uniquely Via Appia. Every inhalation becomes a quiet connection to the natural rhythms that have persisted alongside human passage. Time on the Via Appia is experienced differently. The longer one walks, the slower the world seems to move. The mind begins to attune to small shifts, the rustle of leaves, the scurry of small creatures, the occasional distant call of a bird. These moments are punctuated by reflections on the vastness of history, on the impermanence of empires, and yet the enduring solidity of this road. Each step is a meditation on continuity, a reminder that while civilizations rise and fall, the traces of human effort remain, quietly asserting their presence against the tide of forgetfulness. Archaeologists walking the road today uncover small treasures, pottery shards, coins, fragments of inscriptions, all testaments to lives once lived, hopes once held, and journeys once undertaken. Each find is a dialogue with the past, offering insight into trade, economy, art, and daily life. Yet even without these tangible artifacts, the road itself is the artifact, a continuous, unbroken thread linking the present to the distant past. To walk it is to engage in a form of temporal exploration, where one can almost feel the pulse of history beneath the soles of their feet. And so the road stretches onward, winding through the Italian landscape, offering glimpses of the past, moments of reflection, and encounters with shadow and light. It is a place where silence is as eloquent as speech, where the stones beneath hold stories no words can capture, and where travelers are invited to move slowly, observe carefully, and listen deeply. The road that ended in shadows is not merely a route, it is a meditation, an experience, a dialogue with time itself. Even today, as modern civilization surrounds its more accessible sections, the Via Appia continues to draw those who seek to experience history in its most tangible form. To walk it is to participate in an unbroken chain of human experience, to feel the weight and texture of history beneath one's feet, to witness the interplay of nature and civilization, and to contemplate the vast tapestry of life, death, and memory that has unfolded along its course. In the quiet stretches where shadows fall long and the road seems to vanish into the distance, the imagination fills the gaps. One can picture the carts, the soldiers, the families, the traders, and the pilgrims, all moving along the same stones, all contributing to the intricate, invisible network of stories that make the road alive. It is a place where past and present converse in silence, where every footstep resonates with echoes from centuries gone by, and where the traveler becomes part of something much larger than themselves, a continuous thread in the fabric of time. As night deepens, the road is enveloped in stillness. The stars appear, scattered like distant lanterns across the velvet sky, reflected faintly in the smooth surfaces of the stones. The air carries the chill of evening, the scent of earth and foliage, and the subtle hum of nocturnal life. Here, on the road that ended in shadows, one can pause, breathe, and feel the weight of all that has passed, of all that endures, and of all that continues unseen. The road is infinite in its reach, eternal in its presence, and intimate in its ability to connect those who walk it with those who walked it long ago. And so, one continues along the Via Appia, step by step, stone by stone, immersed in the quiet rhythm of history. Each moment becomes a meditation, each shadow a reflection, each stone a story. Time stretches and folds, past and present intertwine, and the road continues onward, a living testament to human endeavor, memory, and the enduring power of place. To walk it is to walk with centuries, to hear whispers from ages past, to feel the pulse of empires rise and fall, and to move slowly, mindfully, gently, along the stones of the road that ended in shadows. The garden that grew without sun. In the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, nestled between the shimmering banks of the Euphrates River and the sprawling city walls of Babylon, there existed a marvel so extraordinary that it captured the imagination of generations long after it had faded into legend. This was the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a garden that seemed to defy nature itself, a place of green life suspended above the arid earth, a sanctuary of water, stone, and flora that grew without the full blessing of the sun. It was a creation whispered about in history, recorded in fleeting inscriptions, and described by travelers who marveled at its impossible beauty. To walk its terraces, to feel its cool mists upon the skin, was to enter a world suspended between reality and dream, between earth and sky, where the ordinary laws of nature seemed softened, and where imagination found form in greenery and stone. The story begins with Nebuchadnezzar II, the mighty ruler of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, whose ambition stretched as wide as the lands he controlled. Babylon under his reign was a city of grandeur. High walls of mud brick, fortified gates adorned with reliefs of dragons and lions, bustling markets overflowing with goods from distant lands, and temples that reached toward the heavens. Yet among all his achievements, the Hanging Gardens were perhaps the most enigmatic, the most intimate, and the most fantastical. According to legend, they were constructed as a tribute to his queen, Amytis, who longed for the green hills and cool forests of her distant homeland. In a land of harsh sunlight and dry earth, Nebuchadnezzar sought to bring her the serenity and lushness she missed so dearly. Imagine standing at the base of the gardens, looking up at terraces layered upon terraces, each supported by thick stone and mud brick foundations, an engineering wonder of its time. Water trickled and cascaded down in gentle streams, powered by early mechanisms of irrigation that lifted the river's flow to the upper levels. The air smelled sweet and earthy, a mingling of rich soil, flowering plants, and the faint salt of river water. Birds, perhaps brought from distant regions or drawn naturally by the abundance of life, sang and flitted among the foliage, adding music to the garden's gentle ambiance. The hanging gardens were not merely an architectural feat, but a sensory immersion, a place where water, wind, stone, and life combined to create something almost otherworldly. The garden's terraces were meticulously arranged. Plants that would not naturally flourish in Mesopotamia's harsh climate thrived here, supported by ingenious irrigation channels that carried water to every root and leaf. Vines draped elegantly from the edges of terraces, flowering shrubs added bursts of color, and fragrant trees provided shade and respite. Mosses and herbs grew along the damp surfaces, releasing delicate scents into the air. Flowers bloomed in a kaleidoscope of hues, catching the morning light in a subtle display of brilliance. In the quiet of early dawn, the garden must have seemed like a dream suspended above the city, a place of calm and contemplation, far removed from the bustling streets and the weight of empire. The architecture of the gardens was as remarkable as the flora itself. Massive stone pillars supported terraces that seemed to hover impossibly above one another, creating layers of greenery that reached toward the sky. The foundations were strong yet elegant, designed to hold the weight of soil, water, and plant life without collapsing. Paths wound through the terraces, lined with small fountains, carved stones, and perhaps statues of gods or guardians, adding an aesthetic rhythm to the vertical landscape. Walking these paths, one would feel the gentle pull of gravity softened by design, each step a careful balance of nature and human ingenuity, of creativity harnessed to defy the ordinary. Water was the lifeblood of the hanging gardens. Without it, no plants could thrive, and the air would lose its freshness, its scent, its vitality. Ancient engineers devised intricate systems to lift water from the Euphrates, channeling it through cisterns, aqueducts, and mechanical devices, a marvel of early hydraulics. Water trickled from spouts into basins, overflowed gently down steps carved into stone, and nourished roots hidden beneath layers of soil. The sound of flowing water filled the terraces, a soft, constant music that soothed the mind and echoed faintly across the city below. In the midst of Babylon's noise and activity, the garden must have felt like a sanctuary, a place where time slowed, where worries faded, and where the beauty of life itself could be absorbed without interruption. As the day progressed, sunlight played its own part in the garden's enchantment. Shadows shifted across terraces, leaves flickered with patterns of light, and flowers responded to the sun's journey across the sky. Yet the garden's design ensured that even where direct sunlight could not reach, life continued to flourish. The clever use of shading, moisture, and placement allowed plants that might otherwise wither to grow, giving the impression that the garden was self-sustaining, almost magical in its resilience. Observers might have felt that here, in this suspended world, the ordinary rules of sunlight and rain had been gently rewritten, that nature itself had been coaxed into harmony with human vision. The hanging gardens were also a space of intimacy. Royalty could wander quietly along their paths, listening to the water, inhaling the scent of flowers, and enjoying respite from the heat of Babylonian days. Courtiers and attendants would maintain the garden, tending to plants with care, adjusting water flow, and ensuring that every vine, shrub, and tree remained vibrant. In this suspended oasis, the grandeur of empire and the gentleness of nature intersected. There was a poetry to the work, a delicate balance between human ambition and natural beauty, a meditation on the possibility of creating a perfect world, however fleeting, amid the impermanence of life. As evening approached, the garden transformed once more. The sun dipped low, casting golden light across the terraces, painting the leaves and blossoms in hues of amber and rose. Shadows lengthened, water reflected the fading sky, and the air cooled, carrying the faint scent of evening flowers and damp soil. Birds returned to roost, their songs softening into quiet murmurs. The garden seemed to hold its breath, poised between day and night, between life and memory, offering visitors a moment of stillness before darkness settled over the city. Here, in these fleeting moments, one could almost feel the presence of those who had walked the paths before, the echoes of laughter, conversation, and contemplation lingering like a gentle mist. The hanging gardens were not merely a physical space, they were a story carved into the world. They told of love and longing, of a king's desire to bring comfort to his queen, of human ingenuity striving to harmonize with nature, of civilizations reaching toward beauty even in the harshest conditions. Every stone, every channel, every leaf carried meaning, a silent testament to the care and creativity of those who built and maintained them. To wander among the terraces was to step into a narrative woven from earth, water, and sky. A story that could be read not with words but with the senses, with attention, with quiet presence. Legends tell of the garden's lasting impression. Travelers from distant lands marveled at its ingenuity, scribes recorded its wonders in texts, and poets imagined it as a paradise on earth. Yet despite the accounts, its exact location and appearance have been lost to time. Some suggest that it was destroyed by flooding, earthquakes, or neglect. Others argue that its terraces were dismantled as empires fell and new cities rose. And still, in the imagination it endures, suspended between fact and myth. A place where green life flourished against expectation, a garden that grew without sun and yet thrived nonetheless. To walk its terraces in imagination is to feel the full depth of human endeavor and possibility. One can envision tending the plants carefully, adjusting the flow of water, pruning vines, and nurturing flowers that reach skyward. One can hear the soft rustle of leaves, the drip of water, the distant hum of the city, the whispers of wind between stone and foliage. Each moment is alive, a sensory meditation on persistence, care, and the beauty of life sustained by intention and attention. The hanging gardens invite reflection, patience, and an appreciation for the subtle interplay of elements. A gentle reminder that even in seemingly inhospitable conditions, life can flourish when nurtured with care. And so, in the quiet of night, the hanging gardens take on their final transformation. Moonlight bathes the terraces, casting soft silver shadows over leaves and water. The air is cool, scented with earth and blossoms, and the world below sleeps, unaware of the suspended oasis above. In this stillness, the garden seems eternal, a place out of time, where the past and imagination converge. One can walk its path slowly, step by step, feeling the presence of history, the touch of nature, and the resonance of human aspiration. It is a journey, not just through space, but through centuries, a meditation on creation, care, and the fleeting yet enduring beauty of life itself. Even today, long after the Neo-Babylonian Empire has vanished, the idea of the hanging gardens continues to inspire. Archaeologists, historians, and dreamers seek traces of it, study its accounts, and imagine its terraces in vivid detail. It has become a symbol of possibility, a testament to what can be achieved when vision meets persistence, when human hands work in harmony with the natural world. To imagine walking among its green terraces is to walk in the footsteps of those who dreamed it into being, to experience a suspended world of water, stone, and life, and to feel, however briefly, the magic of a garden that grew without sun. As the night deepens, the senses attune to the subtle rhythms of the garden, the flow of water, the movement of leaves, the quiet breathing of soil and stone, all create a gentle symphony. One can close their eyes and feel the cool mist upon their skin, the delicate fragrance of flowers, the soft hum of life that persists even when unseen. The garden becomes not just a physical space but a state of mind, a sanctuary for reflection, imagination, and tranquility. In this suspended moment, the boundaries between past and present, reality and dream, blur, leaving only the enduring beauty of intention realized, of life nurtured against all odds, of a garden that continues to grow without sun in the hearts and minds of those who remember it. And so the hanging gardens remain, not only in history but in imagination, in stories, in dreams, a place of wonder and quiet reflection, a symbol of human creativity and care, a suspended oasis that invites anyone who wanders its terraces, real or imagined, to slow down, breathe, and experience the beauty and persistence of life itself. And there you have it, some of the most mysterious and fascinating relics the world has ever known, each with stories that stretch across time and space. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the secrets that refuse to stay buried. Don't forget to hit subscribe and like if you enjoyed exploring these wonders, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Until next time, keep wondering, keep exploring, and keep uncovering the hidden mysteries of our world with Unearthed Secrets.